This is a 2012 Porsche Cayenne, and it is the best Porsche Cayenne from a decade ago. Not because it is the top trim, but because it is the base model, which means it's the one that you and I can afford. Real talk, I've got no idea how Doug maintains this in public without being very self-conscious, because there's people like a quarter mile that way, and I still am so embarrassed for myself right now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going over my new daily driver, and by that I mean the daily driver that I've had and that I've been hiding from the internet for the last 2.5 years at this point, and that is my 2012 Porsche Cayenne. Now today is just going to be a little bit of an overview of the car with some high-level stuff. I'll do a little bit more in-depth details of this in a future video, but with that said, let's get into it. So this is my 2012 Cayenne. I actually bought this about 2 years ago at this point, and I bought it as a certified pre-owned, which means I got it through a local Porsche dealer, and the out-the-door price was about $20,400, and that was during COVID prices. That was about 62,000 miles on it at the time, which means I got a certified pre-owned Cayenne with a bumper-to-bumper unlimited mile 2-year warranty for less than I could buy a comparable mile RAV4 at the same time. Like, I legitimately checked, I could not buy a warranted RAV4 for the same price as this SUV. So I would like to sit here and tell you that this is the cheapest Cayenne for this generation in the country. I can't say that. Some of the older ones are obviously less expensive, and even for this generation, there was a couple that had racked up a ton of miles, but even the really high mileage ones were still going for about $17,000 to $18,000. So for $2,000 more, I got a full warranty from a Porsche dealership, and I had literally half to a third of the miles depending on which one you were looking at. Now that said, when I bought this, this was the oldest certified pre-owned Cayenne in the country. This is the only 2012 they have certified. They couldn't find anything older than that for a Cayenne in their certified database. So is it the cheapest Cayenne in the country? No, but it is definitely the cheapest certified pre-owned one, and I can pretty much guarantee you that. So the miles weren't bad. It's in one of the most expensive colors, umber metallic. I really like this. It's like that subtle brown flake. So why then, you might be asking, was this so inexpensive? Well, kind of like the Viper, I like to buy things that are not always the prettiest and then make them my own, but this actually wasn't too bad. So if you get here, you can see your typical swirl marks and stuff in the paint. That's not too bad, but all over this car, there's just little dents and dings and scratches. So here you can see one, for example, goes down to there as well. If we walk around the front here, you see a couple of scratches there, a bunch of like rock chips and stuff throughout the hood. A little bit actually took off this badge here on the front end, and then a whole lot more here down low, as well as a little bit of clear coat that's peeling off. Now this is kind of the theme. It also definitely got a toe at some point by the previous owner, because these like toe covers front and back are all loose. And then coming around here, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see, but you got a couple dings on the doors, scratches, things like that. You also got a little dent there, but all relatively minor stuff. Coming around to the back, the previous owner also opened up this hatch into their garage door. So you got a good sizable dent there, but all of this was touched up by the Porsche dealership in the OEM color prior to giving me the car. So if you can actually just step back a few feet, all right, maybe that one's not the best example, but it doesn't really look that bad. And what I wanted out of this was an SUV I could daily drive. So that's pretty much the only thing wrong with it, is all these dents and dings. And the other thing that I personally don't like is that these are like the most base model wheels that you could get on these years of Porsches. Now, these tires are not the tires that came on it. This is a designated winter set. The tires that came on it were all seasons, but they were terrible in the snow. But these are just so base model wheels that I think it really ruins the look of the car. I just think it just screams like soccer mom status. Now, as for why I got this, I'll do another video that goes a little more in depth. I actually still had the Forester when I bought this, but the problem was I shattered one of my ankles, and my Forester was a manual transmission, so I could no longer drive any of my vehicles. I needed something that I could get around with on a daily basis, so I had to buy an automatic. And I said, if I want an automatic, what would I want that to be? And to me, that was a luxury vehicle that has towing capability. There's not a whole lot of things with this level of capability. So what has gone wrong that I've gotten replaced on this this car in the last 2 years. So the windshield wipers, those were not covered under warranty. I did those myself. That was like $80 or something. Other than that, the transfer case was replaced under warranty. I've had 2 tire pressure monitors go out. The only other problem it had was a coolant leak at about 75,000 miles. That was also covered under warranty. And right now we're at 78,500 miles, almost exactly. Now that said, I did clean the outside of this car, so it does look clean on the outside. The inside is untouched, and I do use this for SUV purposes. So let's go into some of the other things I like and dislike about this car. Let's start with some of the SUV purposes things. I'm gonna just go here to the back. Despite how it might look on camera, this trunk is a lot smaller than you think it is. So standing up straight, I can stick in my arm and reach the back seats. To give you an idea of how narrow this is, my girlfriend has a Toyota Highlander. I think that trunk is 1.5 times the depth, but even compared to my Subaru Forester, I think the Forester has a deeper cargo space. It also has a higher roof line, and it's just more boxy, so it's more usable to actually get stuff in there. That's not to say this is bad. I've still done a number of things where I've packed 8 wheels into the back of this car. Well, okay, 1 was in the passenger seat, but you can make things fit if you know how to play Tetris extremely well. Next is that this is an official Porsche trunk liner. Not that you can tell because the adhesive for the label failed within the first 2 weeks, and I'll go into more detail about this in a future video, but just know that I'm really torn about whether or not I like this thing. Obviously it protects the interior, but there are a ton of cons, and this thing is super annoying. Next, I installed this tow hitch on my own. I did splice into the wiring for the taillights on the trailer. I'll probably describe that in a future video, but what that brings me to is my next issue with this car, that a lot of people don't really work on this themselves. So let's be real, the type of people who buy this new don't necessarily need to do things themselves, so there's not as much support in the online community with people who know how to fix these yet. However, now that the warranty is about to expire, I'm going to be in that category. So that's a little bit of a bummer. Is I wish there was just a little bit more information available, especially on a car like this, which we all know German cars have their quirks and features when it comes to working on them. So here's the thing. This is probably the lowest mile car I have purchased that is not a designated sports car. And unless I get more than a couple thousand subscribers, this is probably the newest car I will ever own. However, I'm okay with that because this is really all I need. Now, the only people I've met who don't like this are, 1, the people who are stereotyping you, and then 2, my friends that are like the big truck guys, and they're like, oh, this is a girly looking car, and this is the car for like the gold diggers. But the thing is, I bought this because it has an incredible driving experience, but even though it's got this great driving experience, it can still tow more than their F-150s. It is just an amazingly capable vehicle. It's incredible what this thing can do. So coming down here to the front, you actually have a pretty good angle of attack, which is something most people do not tell you about the Cayenne, which means I have taken approaches in this that no one should ever take in a Cayenne, and it has actually done well. It has never bottomed out, and I've actually gone into a situation where I was 1 wheel pointed at the sky in this car with the trailer on the back, and it pulled out no issues with the trailer up a steep hill on grass, no problem. Extremely capable, especially considering I literally had no off-road expectations given what this thing is. But overall, I mean, I cannot complain about the ownership of this car. Look at that thing. Oh, timeless. Don't get me wrong, I like the look of the newer ones. I think they are definitely updated. I think changing the wheels alone would update the look of this car a lot. But overall, to me, this is a pretty good and pretty timeless design. So yeah, you're gonna get stereotyped as an owner of one of these, regardless of the fact that it costs as much as a RAV4. But as a result, you get a much better driving experience. You get a much better luxury experience. It's a much more quiet, stable ride. And I'm not gonna say that this is a fast car by any standard. It's like a 7 seconds, 0 to 60 time, something like that. But this is still way more fun than any SUV should ever be. So yeah, the back seats aren't huge. This crossbar goes in the trunk. If you're really worried about back seat space, there's definitely bigger options. Like I said, the trunk isn't as big as you would necessarily expect either. This is more of a sporty thing that doubles as an SUV rather than an SUV that does sporty things. So let's hop inside now. Even though this car is 10 years old, it's got the nav screen and everything. It also has, under this pile of mass, an aux cable and a USB plug-in. However, it doesn't have any sort of support for playing music music over your audio system beyond the aux cable. So for example, there's no Android Auto, there's no Apple CarPlay, but beyond that, I just haven't even been able to get my music to sync to it, and you can't play it over Bluetooth either, which is a little bit weird, especially considering 2012 wasn't that long ago. Bluetooth was still an option in some competitors at that time. One of the other things that I do not like is I clearly use this to carry my dogs. I have to worry about the interior of this a lot more than I have to in my Forester, because let's be real, it's a more expensive car, and you can see this is soft leather. If your dog's clawed, it is going to stay clawed. Then another problem with the dogs is all these controls are very accessible. And I've had this issue with other cars as well, where when your dog is in the front seat and they're just trying to like get comfortable or see out the front window, especially when the front windshield goes that far down, they can really get up there, and you'll see there's like saliva splashes all over my dashboard. My dog loves to stand on this center console, and it's this big divide between the driver and the passenger, so it gives them ample room to do so, which means the climate controls get pressed. It gets put into off-road mode. They put it into sport mode. They take off the traction control. They put on the heated seats. They just hit all of these buttons. And while this does look like a lot, it does get very intuitive, where it's just temperature, fan, where do you want the air blowing, and do you want your butt to be warm? That's really all these buttons do. So I mean, if you have a pet, that could be an issue, especially if they ride in the front like mine kind of do. Now that said, because I plan on keeping this car long term, I'm literally just going to abuse the crap out of it and take the depreciation hit. That was my goal with this, is I wanted to spend a little bit more money to have something that I was more comfortable with long term, and I think that is what I got with this car. And because it's already got the dents and dings, I can really use it on a daily basis and not have to worry about that stuff devaluing it too much more. One of the other problems I have is this badge. So the reason why is it has a little bit of what I like to call Viper syndrome, and that is that people stereotype you as the owner of one of these regardless of how hard you might have worked to get one. Like I said, this was a $20,000 car with a full warranty. I cannot beat that for any brand, really. I just could not find a better deal than that, and it just happened to come up at the right time when I literally had 1 foot to drive with and I had no other choice. Even so, people see this and they assume that you are way better off than you are. They try to rip you off, and they just think you're kind of a douchebag, to be quite honest. Now, for some of the pros of this car, you can tell that I am a relatively tall driver. Even so, very good car ergonomically. I've got ample headroom, and I can even go further down in this seat. The ergonomics of this car, the grips are like perfectly placed. Even this one here in the center console, this thing is like just comfortable to sit here and hold when you're driving. But the steering feel is also perfect. The weight is perfect, and this thing I can only describe as the SUV for people who wanted a sports car. This thing does show its weight. You can feel it when you're braking and when you're turning in and stuff. Basically, the handling in this thing does things that no 5,500-pound car should do, and it's kind of actually really fun, especially if you are stuck needing something that is this practical as a daily driver, which is something I was not expecting. And considering that I could not drive anything else at the time, that was very welcome for me, because I didn't want to lose that driving experience while I was forced to drive something that only had 2 pedals. Beyond that, the ergonomics of the seat are like perfect. Like, it's bolstered in all the right places. I got great lumbar support, and as someone who travels a lot for work, this thing is like amazing. This thing has helped tremendously with my neck pain and my migraines and stuff. That's a big reason why I wanted a luxury or more comfortable SUV if I had to go to an automatic. So driving position's great. Visibility is pretty good. I think it could be a little bit better out of those rear quarters if you look out like the 3/4 panel, but there is a good window there, and you do have the little window in front of your side view mirror as well. A lot of people don't put that there, and they just have the overly thick column. That does help a lot with visibility. As minor as that seems, that is a huge plus for me. One of the only things I don't like from a driving perspective, though, is that these are your shifters when you're using that to manually shift your gears. And the problem is, intuitively, you think one is up and one is down, but they're both wired the exact same way. So you both have them go push to go up and pull to go down, which is like a little counterintuitive. So I almost had to train myself to like always push one side and always pull the other. And I haven't used it in a while. I might have those directions wrong, but you get the point. It's just not exactly what I would expect it to be out the gate. Now, obviously the newer ones, they have the actual paddles. I think it's a lot better, but all the Porsches from this era had this problem in my mind. Other issues, especially given current fuel prices, is that this thing is a little bit of a gas hog compared to other comparable SUVs. So my girlfriend has a Toyota Highlander, like I've said. Power ratings are about the same. Displacement is about the same. This is nicer inside. This can go faster, a lot easier, but the Highlander gets consistently 24, 25 miles per gallon combined. This has been getting closer to like 19 and a half. The best I've gotten was about 24.3, and that was on a constant highway road trip from here down to New York and back. But here's the thing, right, is that you kind of know that this is supposed to be that luxury SUV, and you kind of know that there's going to be premiums as far as cost of operating that go along with it. So if you're that worried about gas prices and you're that worried about maintenance costs in general, probably not the vehicle for you. But that said, in return, you get incredible build quality. And that's another reason why I bought this, is I looked at a number of competitors, and I'll do a separate video on what I looked at. But basically, even things that were the same generation, even if they weren't the same year, they were a couple of years newer, as new as like a 2015, 2016, other brands' SUVs that were supposed to be competitors to this have literally fallen apart. Like, I went on a test drive with a couple competitors that I'll describe in another video, and the heads-up display surround literally popped out when I went over a speed bump. The door panels from the door cards, they had panels falling off, whereas this, the leather is like immaculate condition. Nothing is crushed in other than the very side bolster here from the driver getting in and out a little bit. And it's not even crushed down. You can just see it's a little worn out on the edge from sliding in and out. So from a materials perspective, this thing is like way past my expectations. And granted, it's my first car that's like this nice of a luxury car, right? This thing is way out of my budget if I were to buy anything remotely close to it new. But even most of them on the used market are more than I could justify. But in return, I mean, the quality of the materials is just so much better than anything else I've personally experienced. And I think for me, knowing that it lowers my physical pain because of that luxury seclusion, that is worth the operating cost in my situation. Other than having what appears to be way too many buttons at first glance, everything does seem pretty well thought out. I think a prime example of this is the sun visors, and this seems stupid, but I'm tall, so when I have the sun visors out to the side, there's always a gap here from how far back I am that the sun gets through. This covers almost the entire window, okay? But it's not all. You also have a second one that goes down to the front so that you have the option of blocking out both sides at once. And the passenger gets the same thing. So again, it's little things like this that are just very well thought through, even though they're probably over-engineered like all hell. Now, one of the other things I figured out that was way over-engineered is when I was pulling apart the rear to put in the wiring for the tailgate. That was way over secured. Like, you know those little pop fasteners that hold in door cards and stuff? There were about 2 to 3 times as many in the panels back there as I've seen on any other car that I've taken apart. And I've taken apart pretty much every car I've owned at some point. I've taken a panel off of. But in return, nothing on this rattles. This is 10 years old. Nothing on it rattles. With one exception, if I have the bass really high, there's one place somewhere down here by the door that rattles like a little bit at certain bass frequencies, and that is like the only thing I've been able to find. However, and this is legitimately my only design complaint with the whole car, is there is a known whistle that is caused supposedly by that mirror, where if you're on the highway, and especially if there is a cross breeze, something about how it picks up air at the front of it and it goes through the vents creates this ungodly whistling noise. And I've taken it to the dealer 2 or 3 times, and they just say, oh, your climate control's in the wrong setting. Oh, it's just that you have it up there and that's blowing out and that's what makes the noise. And I'm like, no, that noise, like climate air fan, is very different than the ungodly whistling that makes. And in cold temperatures, specifically winter riding, like if I'm going to a ski mountain, it gets way worse. It is so bad. I have not figured out a fix for that. The forums have not figured out a fix for that. Supposedly, there's one guy who claims you can put a piece of tape over like the nose edge, that leading edge of the mirror, and that fixes it. I am not willing to drive around with a piece of electrical tape on the outside of my car. That looks janky as all hell. But supposedly, that is the price to pay to get rid of your wind noise. So maybe I'll try that, but it's not going to be today. So there you have it. That is my poor man's review of a Porsche Cayenne, the cheapest certified pre-owned one in the country. All things considered, this thing has been really good to me, and I've absolutely loved it, and I think I chose very well, which is not something I always say. So even with the warranty expiring, I think I am probably going to hold on to this for a while. I actually do like this thing that much. But that is enough for this episode. So I'm signing off for now. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. What's up? Yeah. Oh, some little kid brigade just stopped me in the filming. That was fun to tell me that I'm not parked properly.